Welcome to the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley, psychology student and international best-selling psychology author of over 30 psychology books, bringing you the latest psychology news, fascinating psychology topics and more each week. If you want to learn more, then please check out connorwhiteley.net/books. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the YouTube video or follow on your favourite podcast app. And here's the show. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 311, the Psychology World podcast with me, Connor Whiteley. And today's episode is on Are Infants Moral? And it is Sunday the 23rd of February 2025 as I record this. So today's podcast episode is a lot of fun because we're looking at developmental psychology and we're looking at whether infants actually show moral behaviour and are they moral individuals, which I think is so much fun because we always talk about if babies are mischievous, if they're naughty, if they're good, if they're angelic, and so on. But you don't always link this to morality. And plus, how does an infant's sense of morality develop? How does it change over their lifespan, etc., etc.? So, this podcast episode does pose a lot of fascinating questions, which we do dive into in a lot more depth. This is a brilliant topic, I flat out love it, and you're going to understand a lot about infant morality by the end of this podcast episode. So you've got that to look forward to in the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the psychology news section, we're reading from the British Psychological Society Research Digest, and the first one is really good and really important as I start to think about job interviews and meeting new people in the workplace. So the first one is the 5 new rules of first impressions. First impressions have long been a mainstay of psychological research. In the past, much of the focus has been on how particular facial features influence our perceptions of how dominant others are, for example, or how trustworthy they appear to be. But as they tend to, researchers are now digging deeper, probing everything from which our initial judgments are actually right to whether being snap judged accurately is necessarily a good thing. To explore some of these new insights, we present our guide to the first 5 new rules. And there's one that I'm actually going to read out in a little bit of depth. So, Rule 2. Like yourself and others will follow. So reads the title of a 2024 paper, which found that an individual's level of self-esteem affected other people's first impression of their personalities. The researchers studied 2 groups, 378 strangers who took part in a speed dating event, and just over 300 people who participated in platonic getting-to-know-you sessions. In the speed dating group, the team found the personalities of those with higher self-esteem were judged more accurately, though this didn't matter how much others liked them. However, when people accurately perceive the personality of someone with low self-esteem, whether in a romantic or platonic setting, they liked them less. In the platonic group, people perceived those with higher self-esteem more accurately and liked them more. So that's all that I'm actually going to read out from this Psychology News article. But I think there's a few comments that I want to make. So first of all, first impressions. They are flat out critical, believe me, because I'm lead ambassador for a lot of different events, because I meet so many people on a regular basis, whether it's teachers, students, other ambassadors, fellow psychology students, lecturers. Oh wow, okay then. I actually do meet a lot more people than I think, just as an everyday occurrence. I'm human at the end of the day. I will judge you on your first impressions, but then I will reevaluate and I will change those first impressions based on me getting to know you though. So I'm very flexible in my first impressions over time. Well, yeah, but like I don't know. and I can admit and I can reflect on when I'm flat out wrong. And I have been, like, I've been flat out wrong about people quite a few times. So that's interesting there. But first impressions, especially when it comes to stuff like job interviews, making new friends, wanting to start a relationship with someone, yeah, believe me, that's definitely a big one. I would just say first impressions are flat out critical. So these 5 new rules based on psychological research are really valuable. They're very interesting. I might delve into them more in a future podcast episode. But for now, though, when it comes to like yourself and others will follow, I forget what the age-old adage is, to be fair, but basically, I've always been told though, especially when it comes to like self-esteem and romantic interest, you basically got to love yourself before others can love you too. And as and as I've been doing this social psychology book though, focused on the self and having your unshakable self, and then the other mental health implications that that has for you, is a brilliant book. I flat out love it because it's based on one of my favorite quotes of like all the time from the Demon Slayer anime. It's just brilliant. So the thing that I really enjoyed about it is that I get to focus quite a bit on self-esteem. Because if we like ourselves, then we do tend to stand taller. We do tend to be more like interested, more confident, more outgoing, and we tend to open up a little bit more, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's definitely interesting, and it's also flat out critical though. So I would definitely say that work on your self-esteem if you want to make a good first impression on other people. So the second one is the Big Brother effect. We're monitored everywhere these days. Mobile phone trackers, front facing cameras on every device, internet history, and now AI grabbing our data from all angles. To give a few examples, as Kelly Seymour and colleagues from across Australia and Germany point out in a recent paper, with the exploration of neural interfaces processing, there's also a very sci fi possibility that one day even our thoughts may be surveillanced. Despite this advancement of surveillance, our understanding of its impact on humans hasn't really advanced at the same pace. Seymour and colleagues' latest work, published in Neuroscience of Consciousness, takes some initial steps towards plugging that gap. They find, whether we realize it or not, being watched exerts an influence on involuntary aspects of perception and cognition. Okay, so I first saw the play 1984 a few years ago when my grandma was still alive, and we also went with my cousin and my granddad. And 1984 by George Orwell. I think that's who did it. I'm pretty sure that's who did it. Um, Forgive me if I'm wrong, but it's definitely quite an interesting one because I watched it at an age where I wasn't really aware of a whole bunch of stuff. So it was definitely interesting to say the least. And the whole Big Brother effect, I definitely think that it's concerning. Because like we all know that whenever we go on a website, whenever we use technology, whenever we order stuff, or to be honest, whenever we have a conversation, our phone just magically picks it up, and suddenly I get targeted by Facebook ads. For example, I was talking to someone last night about this new anime that I've been getting into, Castlevania, and then like for some reason I went on Facebook today, and all my posts are actually about Dracula and Castlevania. And I'm like, I did not Google this. In fact, in all fairness, I think I did a few days ago because I wanted to check it out. But it just happens that as soon as I have a conversation with someone, it actually all my Facebook feed just becomes dominated with it. And yes, I'm pretty sure that's not legal. But at this rate, because of the state of the world, I'm pretty sure no one's actually going to bring a sledgehammer to these massive companies. So, but that's way beyond the scope of this podcast because this is not a political podcast. So I think it's very interesting about the Big Brother effect. We are licensing lots of the data, well, without our knowledge, without our consent, to be fair. So I definitely think that this does have massive implications for our behaviour. And I think psychology has got to start understanding this better. Like, how is this licensing of our data, or to be theft of our data, actually impact our behaviour? Does it make us more cautious? Does it make us more optimistic, more hopeless? Does it actually increase well-being because these apps, these websites are better able to target our needs or stuff that we think we need? And there's a lot of interesting questions, and I think this is definitely something we've got to dive into now, because as this says that with the exploration of neural interfaces processing, that becoming more powerful every month, every year. I think that we are running out of time to understand this. So the last one is, here's why kids are so gross. When adults see something that's physically disgusting, like a puddle of vomit or moldy food, we recoil. The response is thought to be the core feature of the emotion of disgust. It drives us to avoid substances that could be packed with disease-causing pathogens. Why, though, are children not as grossed out by things they find verboten? Samir Ladin at the University of Bristol and colleagues may have found the answer to this question with their most recent study, published in Brain and Neuroscience Advances. The difference, they believe, may lie in the way their stomachs move. Okay, so there's not a great amount that I'm actually going to say about this one because evolutionary psychology and biological psychology, at least the discuss emotion, is not something that I've really focused on though. But I do remember one of my favourite psychology studies that I learned during sixth form. So this was when I was a 17, 18-year-old. I was just starting to study psychology here in the UK. I always remember Fest in 2006. It's an absolutely brilliant study which I flat out love because it was basically showing pregnant women really disgusting photos, which actually sounds really cruel now I say it. And it was basically measuring their emotion of disgust. And there were lots of really interesting conclusions that actually came out of that study. So I really do recommend that you actually read it up, or you can buy biological psychology to get a much deeper understanding of how evolution impacts our behaviour. But the whole point of the emotion of the disgust is that it's something that we evolved to actually protect us, to protect our offspring, just so we can pass on our future genetic material, and just so that we won't get harmed by disease-causing pathogens. So it's interesting. And plus, I also think that another reason why children are not grossed out, basically, is because they actually need to be exposed to pathogens just so they can build their immune system. Even though one of my friends who has a really compromised immune system actually could not do that as a kid because they actually did that because they needed to build an immune system because they were born without one. And what happened was they were really sick for most of their childhood though. So most of their childhood years was literally just spent reading in bed, which think actually sounds quite nice there to like some extent. And that's how they describe it anyway. So I hope you enjoyed the psychology news section. Um, and let's move on to the personal update. So we're moving on to the personal update. This week in the UK, it's been my reading week. So basically, a week without lectures and such. And it's also been like half a term over. So there's also been no schools open, which means I've not been doing my outreach work. So I've actually forgotten how lovely it is to have my mornings back. I honestly cannot remember the last time I actually had these things called Tuesday mornings and Thursday mornings, and even Friday mornings to myself. It's actually quite an alien concept. I flat out loved it because it means I could do my projects, I could do my writing, my business, I could do some psychology stuff, I could do so much stuff that I could never normally do because I'm working. So, first of all, I just want to say that I would say just enjoy it when you've got a bit of time off, whether this is from university, whether this is from your day job or your family situation. I would just say that whenever life gives you a bit of free time, enjoy it, appreciate it, and actually just show some gratitude for it because that's something that I was talking about in my counseling session this week. Though gracious, just being glad that you've actually got stuff in your life, because no matter how bad your life is, and believe me, long term listeners of the podcast will know how bad my life has been at times. And I would just say that even when my life has been absolutely falling apart, when it's been horrific, and when my mental health has been the worst ever, there are still some pretty great things that happen every day. And whether it's just the small things, for example, I was actually able to get out of bed within 10 minutes. To be honest, when my mental health was at its worst, that was actually quite a major achievement. Instead of the 2 hours, the 2 hours. That or one of my favourites was when I was able to have a shower in 10 minutes instead of 5 hours. Yeah, depression is very, very horrible at times. I'll say that whenever you've got some time at yourself, just be grateful for it, appreciate it, and do what makes you happy. Because it's why I did my writing. It's why I did my psychology research, etc. So just enjoy it. Good. And then yesterday, I was doing one of my favourite things ever. I was working a applicant day at my university. Now, I love applicant days because, yes, I get paid money for 4 hours because it was a slightly shorter one. To I talk to potential students, not so much promote the university, but just answer questions and try and show that they're can say great place to study, which it is, to be fair, though, because I really like it, and the school of psychology is brilliant at Kent. But the real reason I love it is because I get to talk to other ambassadors. For example, the two ambassadors who I got to talk to, I honestly haven't seen them for a few weeks, and one of them I've actually not seen for a few months. It was great catching up with both of them, but most importantly, I was actually just be able to talk to my psychology lecturers that there were because that's what I always do. I like being social with them. I like talking to them about their research, their other postgrad and undergrad students, and just how busy they all are, and just interesting things that were because you will get to catch up with them at these open days when people are in talks. So it's great fun. I flat out love it. And me and my supervisor, because she was there, which was a lovely surprise. For the last 20 minutes of the day before I went off, we just spoke about German politics, which was great fun though. And, well, great fun though. And both of us just admitted because we've actually got a work meeting on a Tuesday. And both of us just said basically we will do 10 minutes of actual work, half an hour political talk, and just other stuff that we inevitably start talking about though. And that's what I like about lectures. They're really social. They're really just normal people who just love talking to, that just love talking for a living. So it's a lot of fun. So life is really good. And as always, I always love to hear your thoughts and feelings on today's episode. So you can always email me, connorwhiteley@connorwhiteley.net. You can always leave a comment at the show notes at connorwhiteley.net/podcast. And you can always tweet on Twitter at sci-fi Wiley, or leave a comment on the Facebook post or LinkedIn post. And Blue Sky. I cannot keep forgetting about Blue Sky. I really enjoy hearing from all of you because it really helps make the podcast feel more like a conversation. And please feel free to send pictures of where you're listening in from because I always like to see pictures from all over the world. And today's episode has been sponsored by my brand new book, Moral Psychology, an introduction to the social psychology, biological psychology, and applied psychology of morality. So this book was so much fun to research because it really dives into some quite fascinating questions about what is morality, why do some people show moral behaviour, but then also why do the same people show immoral behaviour? What is our decision making? What are some of the biological processes behind it? But then also, how do societal level factors, how do social group factors impact our morality? So it's really interesting, it's flat out fascinating, I love it. But then also, how does morality develop through the lifespan? So there's a lot of great topics that we really do dive into in this great, really easy to understand book that is a lot of fun. So I really do recommend it. So that is moral psychology, an introduction to the biological psychology, social psychology, and applied psychology of morality. Available for all major ebook retailers, and you can order the paperback and the hardback version from Amazon, your local bookstore or local library if you requested. And if you want the audiobook narrated by artificial intelligence, now you can. Add selected audiobook platforms like Spotify, Google Play, Barnes& Noble, and Kobo, and selected library systems like Biblioteca, Overdrive, and Baker and Taylor. So, whilst buying books helps to support the creation and the editing of the podcast, my time is sponsored by my wonderful patrons. And as always, a massive thank you to my patrons. Your support shows that you like the show and you want it to continue. And as part of my massive Patreon reboot, I'm actually continuing that I schedule posts every day. So around 10 o'clock UK time every day you actually get a brand new assistive psychology post emailed to you, and it's available on a Patreon. So this is either the app or the website, and these are blog posts which you are not going to be able to see for months or, to be honest, years there were, because I actually looked at some of them that I was uploading and I was like, wow, I wrote this blog post 2 years ago, and it's not seen the light of day of a day there. But that's why I'm uploading it onto a Patreon now, just so my patrons can actually get access to it, and they can learn a lot of fascinating topics which we aren't going to cover on the podcast for a little bit. Because I love this podcast, and if I wanted to catch up, I would have to do a podcast episode a day for like 2 months or 3 months straight. I do not have that sort of time. Sometimes it is hard enough to do the YouTube shorts and schedule a month's worth of them in advance. So yeah, so it's definitely difficult, but it's a lot of fun though. So if you want access to tons of great rewards, including these exclusive blog posts, then definitely head on over to patreon.com/ the Psychology World Podcast. But if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, now you can at buymeacoffee.com/ Conor Wiley. So that's enough of the personal update. Let's move on to the content part of today's episode. So moving on to the content part of today's episode. So we're going to be talking about our infant's moral. So this is a great episode. Let's dive into it. When it comes to the topic of morality in children, and more specifically infants, there are generally two schools of thought. Firstly, you have the more traditional school of thought that has a lot of research support. And this is the idea that children learn their morality through their parents. With a lot of references in the reference section at the bottom of the podcast episode, one piece of evidence for this theory is how morality varies from culture to culture. It supports the social explanation of morality, because if morality was innate, then morality wouldn't vary as much from culture to culture, as our sense of morality would have evolved as part of our species. Then another school of thought has a growing body of evidence, and it comes from researchers like Yale professor Karen Weir. These researchers propose morality begins in infancy, and this runs against the idea that morality is taught through parents. So, how can there be so much evidence for both theories? And could it be possible that both of them are right? Now, I know like psychology, and I'm actually going off the blog post slightly. To be honest, when we have two opposing theories, lots of people then say, "Oh no, only one of them can be correct." But in reality, lots of psychological theories are either the same theory dressed up as two different things and called two different theories by different researchers, or there's a lot more overlap than we actually admit. So, going back to the blog post, so there are a few different reasons about why Weir and her critics are both right about morality and how it develops. Firstly, they're both right, because the definition of morality varies slightly from study to study, as does the level or measure of behaviour each study looks at. Since Wid's research refers to an infant's innate propensity to be prosocial, whilst her critics focus on social conventions that differ from place to place. I know this is a silly little example in the grand scheme of things, but it is very apt here. So in the UK, it is not considered moral or immoral to put salt and pepper on your food, but in Portugal, it is considered rude and by extension immoral to put extra salt and pepper on your food, since you are in applying the chef hasn't seasoned their food right. As a result, it is possible that morality is an innate human trait that is universal in the human species, but it is implemented and expressed differently between cultures and even from person to person. We only need to think about the different behaviours people think are moral within a single country or town, let alone an entire species. What did Weir's research show? In addition, Weird found that her series of experiments that infants look longer at helping puppets than puppets that stopped another puppet from opening a box, as well as different variations of the experiment found the exact same thing. So this suggests infants prefer people who help others compared to people who made things more difficult for other people. Of course, this research is only suggestive at this point, but what makes it interesting is that weird study is part of a growing body of research making the same point. Infants do offer help, they do comfort people in distress, and they prefer people who do the same. Personally, I actually think this is a rather lovely and even a heartwarming finding, especially because people like me who focus so much on clinical psychology, we read and focus on mental health conditions, mental health difficulties, and the darker side, I say in air quotes, side of human behaviour from time to time. Therefore, this study is a pleasant reminder about the lighter side of human behaviour and how great psychology research can be. Can these prosocial tendencies be overridden? Unfortunately, as you can probably guess, the innate sense of morality in an infant doesn't stay with an infant unless the parent builds on these propensities. Yet, this isn't always down to the parent, but these prosocial propensities can be overridden by peers and the larger culture as a whole if they convey very different values. What did Weird find out about prejudice? An interesting finding of Weiser's study is that she found another trait that impacted the infant's judgment, and this certainly isn't positive if you think about it. So, we'd found that infants preferred the puppets who liked the same food as the infant. On the surface, this is a very normal finding that, to be honest, I would not care about if I read it in a paper. But Weird makes a very interesting point that I can definitely understand. She implies that this could be the root of adult prejudice, because infants show we might prefer people who are like us and dislike people who are not like us. Remember, the babies also like the puppets that were like them in terms of their shared similar interests in their food. And at first, I thought this was sounding like a silly egg example. But how many conversations as adults have all of us started and bonded over because of food? So I think this food preference does hold ecological validity because it does continue into adulthood. It was only a few days ago that me and a friend were having a conversation about nachos, and neither one of us children would talks about this more in the following quote. Open quote. Babies and infants were far more likely to approve of a similar puppet being helped while having the same positive reaction when the puppets that chose different foods were hindered. This seems to suggest that the root of adult impulses towards xenophobia, prejudice, and more. Close quote. I think that's a very interesting point that will definitely need more future research. Conclusion. Overall, at the end of this podcast episode, we know that infants have an innate sense of morality and what is morally right and wrong. Yet infants have a sense of us and them as well. And this is important to realise because when it comes to morality, morality does account for in-group cohesion, and that's something that I'll talk about in the future. And yet, morality in us and them thinking accounts for the violence that is found in religion, according to the philosopher John Tennant. Therefore, I think the biggest takeaway from today's episode is to foster that sense of love, compassion, and morality in our infants. We need to raise them to be moral, be kind, and to be compassionate to other people, because that will help make the world a better and safer place for them. And isn't that the world we want to live in? So I really hope that you enjoyed today's episode and you got something out of it. As I said a long time ago, I actually do enjoy developmental psychology research because it's interesting, it's very applicable to our lives, and it's just interesting, especially when you combine it with morality, prejudice, and the more topics that we always consider to be more adult. Adult though. But so much of our lives, so much of our opinions, our negative traits do start in childhood because of our life experiences. So it's interesting, it's fascinating, and I really did enjoy today's episode. So if you know anyone who would enjoy today's episode, please share it with them. I'm always really grateful when you wonderful people help spread the word about the podcast. And if you want to learn more, please check out Moral Psychology, an introduction to the social psychology, biological psychology, and applied psychology of morality, available in all the usual places. And if you want to support the podcast on a monthly basis, then please head on over to patreon.com/the Psychology World podcast. And if you want to support the podcast on a one-off basis, then please head on over to buymeacoffee.com/Connor Wiley. Also, feel free to let me know about your thoughts and feelings on today's episode and send pictures of where you're listening from. I would love to hear from all of you. So, have a great day, everyone, and I'll see you next time. Found it helpful. Please remember to like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow the podcast on your favourite podcast app. And if you wanted to learn more, then please check out the backlist of the podcast episodes or my books at conwiley.net. So have a great day, and I'll see you next time.